Hello. Hi, everybody. Hi, Maya. I love that note. Yes, marshmallows, finally. I'm excited too. Welcome to Marshmallow Day. Marshmallows are so much fun. And I know Rich mentioned before class, he was like, you can make marshmallows from scratch. And I was like, yes, of course you can. You can make everything from scratch. But today we're making marshmallows. And if you haven't made them before, they're actually really easy and quick. It's probably the easiest candy to make of all the candies, I want to say. We will talk about like cooking sugar a little bit, but it's all very light. So hopefully some of you are baking along. If you are, throw in the chat how things are going along the way. And marshmallows do need to set for quite a while. So just like a heads up, I do have some marshmallows that are already made. We're going to cut those so you see how to cut your own marshmallows. They can be very sticky. We'll dip them in chocolate a little bit. Maybe we'll do some fun stuff depending on how much time we have. But for those of you I haven't met, my name is Katie. I'm a pastry chef. I love teaching classes here with Michaels, and I love seeing so many of you every week. I feel like now I know your names, and like we all just hang out every week, so that's really exciting. And funny enough, there is no class next week, but there is one the week after. So let me know, yes, and let me know how my audio is. If anybody can't hear me, let me know that as well. I'm always sick this time of year,
It's
so
it's
it could
kind
be
of
that also.
breaking up on
Is it?
my end. It's very choppy. I don't know if it is for everyone else. If you
Can
can,
anyone hear
yeah,
me?
it's a little
Oh
bit
no.
warbly.
Oh, there's a lot of wind. It could be the
That
wind.
that's a little bit better. It might have been rubbing up against your apron there.
Is this better? Can you hear me?
That's better.
I can always take this off and we could go without it. Maybe that would be even better. I don't know. Let me know. If it keeps up, tell me.
Okay, I'll let you know.
Okay. All right. If you can't hear me, let me know. But we're going to dive right in. So just let me know along the way if that needs to change and I'll change it. For
Yeah,
Rich, when you can.
I think it's gonna drive us all crazy.
It's going to drive you crazy. Then don't do it. Hold on. Hold your horses.
Now you're muted.
What about that?
Much better.
Really? Great. Yay. All right. Yay. We fixed it. Isn't it nice when things work out? Great. Okay. Well, come down then when you can. And I'm going to show you what ingredients we've got today for our marshmallows. All right. So very simple ingredients. And Rich was kind enough to throw the recipe up in the chat. So if you missed it, just scroll up a little bit and you can find it if you need it. But we've got very simple ingredients going on. Gelatin is a big one here. So gelatin is what's going to help our marshmallows set. So they're sliceable and fluffy and everything you want marshmallows to be. And note that this is unflavored gelatin. This is just like the kind you buy in the supermarket. It comes in little 1/4 ounce packets that are ready to go. And we need 3 of these packets for this recipe. So quite a few actually, but it does make a very large pan. We're making a 9 by 13 pan, which if you cut your marshmallows into small squares, that's going to make quite a bit. So it does go a long way. Also water, just tap water is fine. Now, in terms of sugar, so there's 3 different kinds of sugar you'll notice in this recipe. Granulated is kind of our base sugar. That's going to be the bulk of it. And you can use kosher gelatin instead. Yes, absolutely. Yes, that is a good point. Granulated sugar is going to be our base. So it's about 2 cups of granulated sugar, which is a lot. But again, we're making a lot of marshmallows. And then you've got what we call sort of inverted sugars or liquid sugars. So in this case, I have honey and I also have corn syrup. Now, depending on your preferences, you can kind of increase or decrease those as much as you want, as long as you're using one or the other. So like if you are really in love with honey and you're making like honey lavender marshmallows, you could go all honey and you're really going to taste it. The corn syrup sort of gives that neutral flavor that kind of balances the honey a bit. So we've got a bit of each, but if you hate honey, you can go all corn syrup. You could even substitute something like glucose syrup, which I believe you can buy at Michael's actually, in the place of corn syrup if you can find it. And that's a little bit less sweet as well, which can be helpful. And yeah, so yeah, Michelle, hopefully that answered your question. So you can replace the corn syrup with more honey. Note that you are really going to get that flavor of honey because it is a big amount. And if it's such a big batch, so yeah, they're actually incredibly shelf stable. These will last for, I would say, a couple of months if you store them right at room temperature. You can freeze them as well. I actually haven't frozen my homemade marshmallows, so it's an interesting question. But I believe they freeze pretty well too, but they last so long at room temperature that there's really no need to. But yeah, they do last quite a while. I've also got some kosher salt that's going to kind of balance the sweetness a little bit. This is going to be for unsticking our marshmallows. So this is a combination of cornstarch and confectioner's sugar. And we'll kind of talk about that a bit more when we get there, but you will need that as well. And then in terms of the fun stuff, so today we're doing peppermint marshmallows, but you can really take this recipe in any direction that you love, whether it's like spiced marshmallows, you could just do straight vanilla, you could add some sort of like dehydrated fruit powder and make a fruit marshmallow, you could add fruit puree, caramel, espresso, even cocoa powder for chocolate, or you can swirl in some melted chocolate. So you could really take this in so many different directions. But today for peppermint specifically, we're using a peppermint extract, which is so nice and lovely, and also a little bit of gel food coloring because we're going to swirl some pink swirls in there. Yes, Rich, the options are endless. It's so true. So that's pretty much it. I've also got some candy canes that we're going to kind of top them up a little bit. So that's going to be fun as well. Now, in terms of equipment, I know some of you probably are looking at this and you're like, oh, candy thermometer. It's optional for this. I would say for most candies that you're making at home, it is really important to have a candy thermometer to make sure you really get the right texture. For something like marshmallows, if you don't have a candy thermometer, we'll talk about how you can make it without. And it's actually pretty simple, so that's fine. But it is really nice to have one of these, especially if you're making other types of candies or caramels and things like that. So this can be helpful. Other than that, I've got my stand mixer off to the right where you can't see it with a whisk attachment. And I've also got a small pot. And this is really just to crush my candy canes. So the rolling pin is totally optional as well. But we're going to dive right in. Are you guys ready? Are you excited? I love marshmallows. We're going to cut them into like little snowflakes and everything. I think it should be really cute. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to kind of set this all up where you can see it because we're basically going to be working with all of these things at the same time. So I've got my stand mixer, I've got my small pot, and I've got my ingredients. Now, the first thing we need to do is bloom our gelatin. I'm going to take all these packets. I'm going to open them up and I'm going to pop them right into my mixing bowl. And the reason, does anybody know why we bloom gelatin? I'll give you a minute on that one. And to that, I'm going to add half my water. So I've got a cup of water. We're going to add half of it. Exactly, Maya. So it's not so clumpy. So blooming, it kind of activates the gelling properties in gelatin a little bit. It also keeps it from clumping up in your recipe, which can be really helpful. And it just makes everything kind of mix more evenly. So I do want to just give it a stir, make sure there's no dry patches. And then all I'm going to do is kind of like leave that off to the side. That's it for the gelatin portion. And in the meantime, we're going to start cooking our sugar syrup. Now, when we say sugar syrup, this is usually when people are like, oh my God, we're cooking sugar. The water can be room temperature. Yeah. No need to use any sort of hot water or anything like that. We're going to cook this all together. So just room temperature water. Even if it was cold water, that would be fine too. So my extra half cup of water, I have half cup in here, half cup in there. My granulated sugar. My honey is going in. It's like an everybody in the pool kind of situation. And it's funny because I feel like when people think marshmallows, they usually think like egg whites. I feel like that's a usual, but it's like, oh, egg whites must be in marshmallows because they're so light and fluffy. But actually, in most marshmallows, there are no eggs at all.
Katie Trudy's asking if beef gelatin would be okay for this recipe.
Oh, well, personally, I have not used beef gelatin. I would say most likely. I have not tried it. I would do a little research on that one just to make sure, because I don't want to tell you something that's not true. But it would be interesting for sure. What measures for granulated sugar and honey? So the honey is a quarter cup. Corn syrup is 2/3 of a cup, and the sugar is 2 cups. So now that everything is together, same idea, give it a little stir just to make sure there's no dry patches. And then the rule is when you're cooking sugar, you never want to stir your sugar. And the reason for that is sugar loves to crystallize. Now, the thing about this particular sugar is that we've added all of this inverted sugar, this liquid sugar. So we have our corn syrup in there, we have our honey in there. So those things help prevent sugar from crystallizing. So in that way, ooh, I have to put that in, hold on. And that way we sort of avoid that risk a little bit, which is really helpful. But still, just as an extra insurance policy, you never want to stir the sugar while it's cooking, just to make sure. Ooh. All right, so we're going to go medium to high heat. And all we're doing is cooking this to what's called softball stage. So softball stage is going to be at the point where if I took a drop of that sugar out and put it in some ice water, it's almost going to make like a soft, squishy ball. That's what we call softball. So that's what we're looking for. If I kept cooking the sugar syrup to what's called like a hard crack stage, it would be more of a hard candy. If it keeps going, it's going to turn into caramel. So it's kind of fun to kind of see your sugar. And if you've never made a homemade caramel sauce before, you get to sort of see all those stages along the way. You get to see softball stage, you get to see hard crack stage, and then caramel, and the caramel deepens in color. So it's kind of a fun process. But today, all we're doing is cooking it to softball stage. Now, if you have your candy thermometer, you'll see it kind of written on there, which you may not be able to see here, but it's got 240 degrees, and it has a little thing that says softball stage on it. So if you do have this, it's really handy because it'll kind of let you know when it's ready. And I just basically clip it right onto my pot. And I could just glance at it every now and then and just see how it's doing. And when it gets there, then I'll know that we're good to go. Now, while we wait for this, we can start preparing our pan. So for this recipe, we're going to want a 9 by 13 inch pan. So I've got my pan here. I do like to line it with parchment because it's just so much easier to pop the marshmallows out if the pan is lined. And also to just give it a really light spray. That's going to help as well. And I am using sort of a deeper pan. And the reason for that is it's much easier to wrap marshmallows without them sticking if it's well above the surface. So like my marshmallows are probably only going to go halfway up. I've got all that room where I'm not going to risk the plastic wrap kind of adhering to the top of the marshmallows. If you're working with a lower pan, you're going to sift a layer of the sugar we're going to use over it before you wrap. So that's kind of the alternative. But if you have a deeper pan, I would definitely say use it. Now, we sort of talked about this lightly before, but this is a combination of cornstarch and confectioner's sugar. And you may find some recipes only call for confectioner's sugar, and that's fine. The reason that me and many others prefer to add cornstarch to this mix is because cornstarch sort of keeps that sugar mix from melting. Confectioner's sugar naturally has a little cornstarch in it. That's what kind of keeps it that powdery consistency. So by adding a little bit more, it's just going to make sure that my marshmallows aren't going to soak up all that sugar as it sits. And it's just really going to help everything, keep everything from sticking. So all I'm doing is like a light sifting all over. And once we pour our marshmallows in, this is just going to keep it from sticking to the pan. You don't have to worry about the sides. We're only coating the bottom. And the rest of this is going to be for the top. And once I cut the marshmallows, I'm going to toss them in that mixture as well. So any questions along the way? Today we are going to have some waiting time, just FYI. There's going to be a few minutes between stages. So feel free to like question it up or let me know how your past bakes have gone. If anybody has baked anything that we've made along the way in these classes, I definitely love to hear about that as well, because that would be so fun. But you can see my mixture is just starting to boil. So just to give you like a little, if you don't have a candy thermometer, I'm going to grab a glass of ice water and I could show you what it looks like when you reach softball stage, even without a thermometer on hand. Look at that guy go. He's bubbling. If it starts making you nervous, just slow it down. I know, it's really bubbling. I may or may not have chosen a large enough pot, but we're going with it. I think it's like right there. It's kind of fun. It's weird watching the sugar boil. What? It's so fun. I love watching sugar boil. It's funny because first it's going to be foamy, then it's going to settle down. And as it thickens, when it reaches softball, it almost looks like corn syrup. You'll notice like those viscous bubbles start to just thicken in texture a little bit. It's kind of like you'll know it when you see it, kind of a deal. But if I look at my thermometer, right now I'm already at about 225-ish. And remember, we're only going to 240. So this is only going to be another couple of minutes. But you could see, now if anyone doesn't have a thermometer, grab your ice water if you're doing this in real time. And just as a tester, it's not there yet. But if I take my spoon and I just drop a drop or two into my ice water and kind of fish it out. Right now it's like really sticky. It's not setting up into a ball. It's just kind of coating my fingers, almost like corn syrup. Now, when it gets to softball stage, you're going to see how it's going to kind of hold its shape a little bit. So if you are thermometerless, this is how you're going to check what stage you're at. And remember, when you're cooking sugar, you can never go too slow. So if you're getting to the stage where you're like, oh, I really want to test this, I don't know if it's ready, slow it down all the way, very, very low heat, so it's not going to get out of control or go too far before you're ready. And that way you have time to test it before it gets too hot. All right, so I'm at 230, so we're almost there. It's the same idea. Let's test it again just to see the difference. Same thing. See how it's very liquidy. The beauty of ice water is it cools it down so fast that you could just really check it right away. Okay. I made the bagels for the first time. Oh, that's so nice. They came out wonderful. I'm so glad, Jane. That's awesome. What do you strain in the pan? Sugar. Oh, yes. So we sifted. So it's a little bit of cornstarch and a little bit of powdered sugar combined. And you'll see that in the recipe. I think it's 2 tablespoons of cornstarch to about a 1/4 cup. I know. What's funny, Deb, is actually once it goes in the ice water, it completely cools right away. That's the best part. All right, we're at 233. We're almost there. This is the beauty of a candy thermometer. You could just watch it. We're almost there. So I'm going to slow this down because, again, I don't want it to go too far before I'm ready. And I kind of want the chance. I'm even going to turn it off. I'm going to let that residual heat do its job. We're almost there. All right. So it's going to be hard to see this. But you see how once this sugar cools, I can almost play with it. And it makes a little ball in my fingers. I've got like a sticky ball forming. I made the chocolate bombs and burned the chocolate twice. Oh no, I'm so sorry. So we're like a little shy of 240. So you see how, as it's setting, you see how it's kind of forming a little bit of structure? We've got a little bit of like, we can play with it a little bit. When it hits 240, it's going to be much more malleable. All right, 2 more degrees. We're so close. And same goes if you're making hard candies without a thermometer, you can check it in the ice water the same way. As soon as it firms up, that's when you know you're at that hard crack stage. All right, so we should be right about 240. I'm gonna take this out. The best way to clean these is just pop them in a glass of water and just let the sugar dissolve. That's the easiest way. And I am gonna test it for you guys so you could see. We'll let that sit a minute so it cools down. And in the meantime, I'm pouring the syrup right into my mixer. My mixer is not on. I'm just pouring it into the bowl over the gelatin. It's all going to combine together. Get this out of here.
Catherine's wondering, she said that you mentioned you could mix in other flavors and whatnot. She's
Yes.
wondering about other extracts. Do you recommend any other extracts to use? And would you use the same amounts with a different extract?
Yeah, so actually what's great about marshmallows, and I am going to whip this, so this is going to get like a little bit loud. So give me 1 sec. I'm going to show you how I'm whipping this, and then I'm going to move this so I can hear you. So hold on 1 second. We're just going on medium speed, and now I'm going to set this aside. Give me 1 sec for that. Okay. So actually the beauty of marshmallows, if you can hear me, and I'm hoping that I can hear you as well, is that we're actually adding any sort of flavoring at the end. So whether that's an extract or that's spices or anything that you want, you're going to wait till the very end of whipping to add all that stuff. So you can actually taste and add to taste, which can be so helpful. And I just want to show you this. So this is our soft ball. See how it's like a squishy ball, but I can roll it. I can kind of play with it. This is our softball stage. So just so you know what that looks like, when you drop it into your ice water, that's what you're looking for. Oh yeah, spices. So gingerbread spice would be so fun. Chai spice, cardamom marshmallows. Really anything that you want would be great. But yeah, extracts, any type of extract would be wonderful, whether it's vanilla, orange, almond, rose, anything that you like. And then just adding it to taste. So this way, you're not overdoing it. That would be awesome. All right, so I'm going to crank up the speed, and I'm going to bring it back over so you can see how this is changing. I may or may not be able to hear you a bit close to me without the mic in. Could you make pumpkin? Absolutely. Yeah, you can either add pumpkin spice, or you can actually dry out some pumpkin puree. You can either roast it in the oven, so it kind of eliminates some of the excess moisture, or you could do that on the stovetop and then add a little pumpkin puree right in. Just note that whenever you're adding something that's in a liquid form or even in a puree form, that is going to affect the texture of your marshmallows slightly. So being careful not to add too much is important, because you don't want to thin out that consistency. But you absolutely can add any sort of puree, like pumpkin puree, fruit purees like raspberry, really anything like that. I'm going to crank this up so it won't take too long. So you can sort of see it changing and becoming more white in color. And it almost is going to look like a meringue by the time we're done with it, which is kind of magical considering there's only sugar in here and gelatin and no egg whites at all. But somehow we get this like really fluffy light mixture, which is so fun. And then of course I still have my peppermint extract, and I have my salts, and I've got my color. I like almond extract, but find you can really overdo it. Oh yeah, that's for sure. So I would definitely start with less. I would start with about half the amount for almond, and then kind of work your way up. Just taste your marshmallows as you add it. And we'll get to that point in about a minute or so. And I'm using the whisk attachment. Just a heads up, that's a whisk attachment. How much would you use? I would say for a batch this size, if I was using chai spice or pumpkin pie spice, I would probably start with a teaspoon or 2 teaspoons and just give it a taste, because it is a lot of sugar. It's like a very light, airy, sugary mixture. So it can really handle a good amount of spice. Wow. All right. Ooh, that sound is gone. Oh, fabulous. All right, so check this out. Does vanilla extract being brown affect the color? It's funny that you say that. Yes, let's talk about that a little bit. But first, I just wanted you to check out how this is changing. You see this? It's so fun. It's so marshmallowy. And you're going to want to keep going a little bit. I'm actually going to let this whip about 2 more minutes until it's almost pipeable. Like you should have almost a meringue if you're imagining like meringue cookies that you can pipe, that's kind of the consistency that you're looking for. Soft peaks is fine. Even like a medium peak would be even better. And then we're going to spread it into our pan. At this point, while it's nice and soft, this is when I want to add all of my stuff, my extracts, my salt, anything else that I'm adding for flavoring. But somebody asked about vanilla, and actually, so if I'm making vanilla marshmallows, I feel like I bring this up every class. I feel like Michael should carry this. But the Nielsen Massey vanilla bean paste, the beauty of this is you're getting like this flecks of vanilla bean throughout the marshmallows, and I feel like that's just so lovely. So I definitely recommend that over using extract for something like marshmallows where you can actually see it in the mix. But vanilla extract is fine as well. And it's so much white, like it's a big bowl of white. It's not going to change the color in a noticeable amount. So you'll be fine without worrying about that. But I'm going to get my salt in. And this amount is up to you. I like a good amount of salt in my marshmallows. But again, the beauty of marshmallows is this is cooked and you can taste it and just see where it's at. So that's really fun as well. You can kind of add these things as you like. So I've got a little peppermint extract. I'm just sort of like adding it by heart. And I'm just going to keep whipping this in a little bit here. I'm going to set this aside one more time for a couple of minutes just to whip in. And I'm going to scroll down this chat.
Can you share the name of the vanilla bean?
It looks like Swiss meringue frosting. It does. Absolutely. What was the name again? So that is Nielsen Massey. Yes. I love this stuff. This is like if I could keep anything in my purse, I think it would be this. I would add it to my coffee. I would add it to just about anything. All right. So we're looking pretty good. Now, in terms of color, same idea. If you want to color the entire batch of marshmallows, let's say I was making like rose marshmallows with using rose water, or anything like that. If I wanted to color the whole amount, you would add your coloring at the same stage that we added our flavorings, just to give it time to kind of mix in completely. But what we are doing today is we're swirling the color. It's a little bit of a fun twist, which is pretty classic for peppermint marshmallows. Now, the one thing I do like to do is just color a little bit of my marshmallow, just to kind of give it some extra. So it's not just swirled on top. So I'm going to take some of my mixture, and you can see how it kind of thickens up, right? So like at this point, you can give it a taste. I can see like, is it pepperminty enough? Do I need more? Do I need a little more salt? Whatever it is, you can adjust it. I like that. Mine is very nice and balanced. And to just some of this, I'm just going to work in a little gel color. So the beauty of gel color, whether you're making marshmallows, French macaroons, or anything like that, is you're going to get the most vibrant color in the smallest amount. So it's not going to thin out my marshmallow at all. All it's going to do is add really deep color. You can see how fun that is. Now I like to do like a good amount in this small bit. And then I'm going to swirl it into my larger bit. It's kind of a fun color. It's like pinky, but it's not like overwhelming. And you can see how sticky it already is getting. It kind of sets up pretty fast. Once I have it in, all I'm going to do is just like a very light, just to get it in the mix, and that's it. So right into my prepared pan. And when you're adding this to your pan, kind of try not to mess with that sugar that you sifted on the bottom too much. So you notice I'm not really like spreading it around yet. I'm just flopping it in there. And I do feel like flop is the right word when it comes to marshmallows. Very flopsy at this point. Get it all out. And before it sets up too much, you could just move it with your spatula, or you could take a small offset spatula. Would be even better. And just kind of push it around. You could also do this with wet hands. If you're like, oh my God, my marshmallows are setting and I can't work fast enough, just wet your hands and just get in there and kind of pat it out. And just spread it right to the edges. And at this point, we're going to swirl the top. And any toppings you want to add, you could add those as well before this sets. So something like sprinkles. I'm going to add candy canes, anything like that. Now's the time. So I'm going to take a little bit more of my gel color. And just little dots wherever I feel. Can kind of do it randomly. And this is totally optional. It's just fun. A little knife or even a toothpick. And just kind of make big swirls. And you do want to kind of swirl it in because you don't want food coloring, you know, like sitting suspended on the top and never really setting in. So give it a good swirl. That looks kind of fun. Let it settle a little bit. And yeah, it does not, would it work with regular food coloring? It would. Swirling is going to be a bit trickier if it's super liquid. But you can use regular food coloring that's not gel color, yes. But yeah, this coloring won't change the flavor. Right? If you add too much liquid, I feel like you can sometimes taste it a little bit. So I'm just lightly crushing my candy cane. I'm just going to sprinkle all over, just for a little something. Isn't that fun? Like, that's so fun. Whee! They're so fun. Now, if my pen was shorter, the way that I could wrap this up, you're going to want to wrap this and let it set for at least 4 hours. It's helpful to make it the day before because it really gives it time to kind of set up nicely before you cut. But if your pen is too low, if I put plastic wrap on the top, it's going to stick right to the top. And when I try to remove it, it's like a whole thing. So in that case, take more of that sugar that you dusted on the bottom and sift a layer over the top before you put your wrapping on. And that's going to keep it from sticking. In this case, because it's so low in my pan, all I have to do is take my plastic wrap and just go right around. Give it, that's what we call like a hotel wrap. When I worked in restaurants, you go under. You go over. And it's like nicely sealed. Makes it very convenient. That's it. So just at room temperature, it's going to set up nicely. My pan is about, it's like a standard, like a brownie pan, like a 9x13. So it's about 2 inches deep. The marshmallows are only about 1 inch. So most pans, I think you cut after it's ready. Yes. So if I wanted to use a tray mold, should I try sifting sugar all over and dropping the marshmallow? Yes. Or is that just a crazy idea? No, that's not a crazy idea at all. I would say definitely, yeah. Make sure you spray first, just the way we sprayed our pan first. And then sift your sugar in, just to give it like some extra help. And it might help also to kind of pop them in the freezer if they won't come out cleanly, just to help them firm up a little once they set. That could be helpful as well. Hello. The magic of television. Yes. All right. So we are going to start cutting. So cutting marshmallows can be a tricky part, but not really, as long as you do a few simple things. So I've got a chef's knife here. Get this stuff out of the way. I've got a little bit of cooking spray. You could use gloves if you want to. I'm going to keep my sugar on hand. And also, it can be helpful. Where is it? To have a big bowl just to put your marshmallows in as you cut. So if you've done everything right, you're going to first cut around your pan. So first, I'm just going to make sure my marshmallows don't stick to my knife just by giving it a quick spray. Now, along the way, I'm going to kind of clean it in the sink with a little hot water. You will get it sticking every now and then. That's kind of the nature of marshmallows. I'm just cutting around my edges first. And once you're kind of loose, a little bit of sugar on your hands is going to kind of help you along the way. So I'm going to kind of play with this a little bit. And just go in. Pop it right out. If it's sticking anywhere, kind of work it out or go back with your knife. And remember, we lined our pan with parchment. So I've got parchment on the bottom. Now, before I flip this over, if you didn't already dust with sugar, now is the time. You could just flopsy the whole thing. It's so fun. And it just kind of comes right off. Now, if anything sticks and you're like, oh my God, I had an area that like really stuck, because it's parchment, you could just kind of like work it off and it should be totally fine. Now, at this point, you kind of have some options. You can cut this however you want. So we could do something as simple as let's trim our edges first. Because of course, in the pan I was using, I sort of have these like leaning sides. So I want really clean edges. And these are fun. You can make s'mores with these scraps. Use like a little kitchen blowtorch. Can make Rice Krispie treats with those. My dog heard there were marshmallows. She's coming over. All right. So one of you mentioned using a mold. Another alternative to using a mold is you can kind of just use cutters to cut out shapes. Like, for example, I have these fun snowflake cutters. So same idea, kind of dusting everything in sugar. And then just, oh, I did the wrong side. There we go. Shaking it off. And then when you're doing this, just like full conviction, right through. Don't think about it too much. Little snowflakes. Just like a really fun gift. Like a little teacher gift. You could put these in like a cellophane bag with a little homemade hot chocolate mix in a jar or something like that would be so cute. But if you don't want to use cutters, the rest I'm going to cut squares. It's a fun size because you could put it like right in your hot cocoa. It's just like one perfect marshmallow. And again, those scraps, don't throw out any of those scraps because you could repurpose them in so many ways. But for squares and things like that, all I'm going to do is you can mark this before you cut, about an inch or so. And then just write down. And if along the way your knife starts maybe like picking up a little bit of the marshmallow, just a little bit of hot water to clean it off. You could spray it one more time. And while I do this, I'm going to start heating up some melted chocolate in the microwave. And some of these are going to get a little dip. At this point, you could turn them around. All right, so same idea, kind of mark it before you start so you know where you're going. You can use a ruler. And then just write down. Try not to saw at it, just really go through in one go.
We have someone asking, what about a pizza cutter?
Oh yeah, you could. Sometimes I find those get a little, you know what I mean? It's like it wobbles. I always prefer a chef's knife for things like this. But you could. These are also really thick. You know, they're about this, I would say about 3/4 of an inch. These are. So it's hard with a pizza cutter sometimes to do things like that. Do you have any tips for marshmallows made with agar-agar as a substitute for gelatin? You know, agar-agar sets up to such a different consistency, which is kind of funny. It's almost like it's like fluffy and chewy, but it's almost like it breaks into shards a bit more than gelatin does. So I would definitely find a recipe that's like specifically formulated for that. That would definitely be helpful. Dun, dun, dun. Yeah, we're gonna chocolate dip. All right, so some of these I'm not gonna dust because if I'm dipping in chocolate, I don't want to then dust them in powdered sugar because it's not gonna stick properly. So some of these I'm gonna leave as is. The rest, if I was storing marshmallows like these, I would take a bit more of this sugar mixture, the cornstarch and confectioner sugar, and just toss them. So this is gonna keep them from sticking together. You won't have to worry about once you put them in an airtight container or a cellophane bag, they're not going to stick. They're just going to be lovely little fluffy marshmallows. And you could see like how squishy. They're so fun. Beep, beep, beep. You could also do these in a smaller pan, so they're really fat. You could also pipe these. If you whip them until they're thick enough, you could pipe shapes, like little panda bears and things. You could have so much fun with these. And they will last a long time. So I would pop these into an airtight container, and you could store them at room temperature in just a cool, dry place like your cabinet for about a month or two, as long as they're stored properly away from heat and things like that, which of course would sort of soften your sugar. But they last a really long time. They just really stay well for a very long time. Kind of the same as store-bought marshmallows. You can think about how long those last. Very similar idea.
What about freezing, Katie? Does it change the consistency at all once they thaw?
Yeah, I kind of, it's funny, like I've never bothered because they last so long at room temperature. So I can't say for sure. I know like I know in the past, if I've used like a mold or something just to help me unmold them, I've frozen them for a short period of time. But I've never stored them in the freezer long term just because it's so, it just seems like a little unnecessary. But if anybody tries it, let me know. It's one of those things I would do a little Google search just to make sure before you do it. But they really, I mean, like if you need them longer than 2 months, they really do last such a long time at room temperature. All right, so let's see how our chocolate is doing. So I've got a bowl of chocolate. This is dark chocolate. I'm gonna give it another 30 seconds. And we're doing what's called like a quick temper on our chocolate. You can also use candy melts for this. Let's talk about tempering just a touch when we're doing something like candy. Now, tempered chocolate, you want your chocolate to set up really smooth and glossy. You want it to set up hard. That snap and shine is what we sort of talk about when we talk about tempered chocolate. And so typically to temper chocolate, you're going to be kind of heating it up, cooling it down, agitating it. So the quickest way to temper, if you're looking for just a shortcut method, it's kind of this method. So this is like the microwave method of tempering chocolate. So I did, I have these dark chocolate, these big old chips that I popped in the microwave. And all I'm going to do is melt them about 2/3 of the way. Now, it doesn't have to be like an exact science or anything. But what that does is the chocolate that isn't melted is going to cool down the chocolate that is melted. And we're going to kind of achieve this nice tempered state where the chocolate is going to be really smooth and set up really nicely without being overheated. And we don't really have to worry too much about getting too scientific with it. So right now I would say it's about 50-50. So I'm going to keep going. Let's go another like 15 seconds or so. Yeah, it's such a fun afternoon activity. I feel like kids would like this too, especially the chocolate dipping part. My daughter's 4. She would just be eating all the snowflake marshmallows. But if your kids are a little bit older, it'd be even more fun. All right, so you do want to check your chocolate pretty often. So like every 10 to 15 seconds. And you can see at this point, I'm about 2/3 of the way. So all I'm doing is just continuing to stir until the rest of my chocolate, that extra third that's not melted yet, until it melts. This is our quick temper. And you could also use candy melts if working with chocolate is like not your favorite. Candy melts take that whole tempering portion out of the equation. So that could be really easy as well. But you can see how quickly it's all melted, nice and smooth. And now we're ready to dip. So a baking sheet. I've got a few more candy canes here just for it to like sprinkle on top, which I thought would be cute. And the one thing you want to do if you have dusted some of these is just kind of brush off some of that dusting because we don't want all of that in our chocolate. So kind of clean them up a little bit just with a pastry brush, or you can even just kind of like shake them off in your hand a little bit. We'll send them over here so they'll stay nice and clean. And then once they're all cleaned off and depowdered, you could kind of dip as you like. So you could take a little dipper tool and dip them completely if you wanted to. You could just dip the top, which can be really pretty. I always like to do this sort of like offset situation because I think that's just always pretty. And you'll see after I dipped, I kind of swiped off the rim of my bowl. And that's going to keep what we call like a foot from forming, where the chocolate kind of swells out past your candy. You want it to be really nice and clean. And while the chocolate is still wet, you could sprinkle just like a little bit more candy cane on top. That could be really cute. You could also drizzle with a piping bag. Just wiping it off. So cute. And if you are dipping, you do want to make sure that you store them in a cool place. If you have any doubts about it being cool enough, you can put these in the refrigerator in an airtight container. That would work also. But they're kind of fun. Shake off some of that sugar. This one I'm going to do the top or maybe the bottom so we can see the swirl. Just a little base, a chocolate base. We could take a couple like that. Shake them off. Ooh, they're so sticky. Hey, hey, you. Little chocolate in a piping bag. We did the same idea with our cocoa bombs, if anybody saw that class. And I think we made a cornet in that class also, but just a little chocolatey drizzle. So cute. So if you do dip them, you could let them sit at room temperature, or you could pop them in the fridge until they set. Bag them up the same way. And there you have it. What chocolate did I use? I used a dark chocolate. This is actually, funny enough, somebody sent me a whole bunch of free chocolate. I think I got 40 pounds of chocolate. So I have like an entire drawer of my kitchen filled with chocolate, but it was, oh, I'll show you what I'm using. This is one of the bags. I like these huge bags, but this is a Ghirardelli dark chocolate wafers. But any kind of chocolate that you like will work really nice. Just make sure it's like a really nice, a high quality chocolate that has good cocoa butter content in the mix. So typically that's a bar chocolate that you find in the supermarket will have better quality to it. It's going to melt a little bit easier. I know 40 pounds of chocolate is dangerous. I've actually been really good about going through it like just when I need it for recipes. I haven't been snacking on it too much, but milk chocolate is like that's my thing. If I could just eat milk chocolate all day, I think I would. So I have a bag of that I haven't opened yet, just to make sure. Does putting them in the fridge make them stiff? Does it help them come to room temperature? Yes. So yeah, it will stiffen them up. Same way like we sort of talked about like freezing them to stiffen them up if you're unmolding marshmallows. I would only refrigerate them just to set the chocolate. So it could be 10 minutes, 15 minutes. And then you could just bring them back to room temperature, and your chocolate, if it's tempered, like we talked about, it should stay set at room temperature, which would be nice. But yeah, if you do store them in the fridge long term, just let them stand at room temperature about 5 to 10 minutes. They kind of warm up pretty quickly. And then you can go ahead and serve them. All right. Whew. Any questions? What do you think? Thank you guys so much for joining me. This is always so much fun. And I think the next class, let's see. Oh, they're so pretty. So the next class, there's like these Valentine's Day cookie cakes. Definitely come by for that if you're free. And there's also Valentine's Day truffles. And we're going to be making a heart-shaped box, which is so fancy. So I hope to see you there for that as well. But thank you, Rich, for all of your help. Thank you so much, Karen, Tina, thank you, Monica. Milagritos. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you so much. Have a great day. Happy baking. Enjoy your marshmallows. I'll just be here eating marshmallows. And yes, you can rewatch. Look how fluffy they are. You can rewatch this on YouTube in about 48 hours. They'll be posted, and they're so yummy and so fluffy. Look at this. Yum, yum, yum. Thank you so much. Have a great day. Thank you.